Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kalman and Nikolay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session about customizing the developer experience. Yeah, I'm Kalman. He's Nikolay. We are from the team who is bringing you the AL development environment. So our agenda for today, we are going to talk.
Wait, we don't see this. Oh, we see the screen.
Yeah. We're going to talk today about some of the non-obvious AL settings that are there, but probably nobody knows that they are there. Then we are going to have a brief introduction into Workspaces and project-to-project reference resolution. Then we are going to talk about dependency publishing, and I'm going to touch briefly at the end on rapid application development. That said, I give the word to Nikolay.
So hello everyone, welcome. I hope you had a nice session so far, and this one will be good also. So let's start. So AO settings. Okay, I believe most of the people here should be AO developers, and as AO developers, you have three vital configuration files while you're developing your extensions. You have your app.json file, where you specify the identity of your app, dependencies, version, publisher, and more. Some other configurations also. You have your launch.json, where you specify the configurations to connect to your Business Central server. And then you have one of today's topics, AO settings. So let's take a look on AO settings, how you can configure them, where you can modify AO settings. So first up, so-called user or global AO settings. These you can find when you open the settings, graphical interface in Visual Studio Code. You can either find the extension, the AO extension, and modify them using the graphical interface, or you can actually open the settings by pressing Control and comma, and then pressing on that small button on the top right corner. There you'll find the JSON editor for your settings, and you can add AO settings over there. AO settings, they start with the prefix AO dot. Okay, where else? You have your workspace settings. So that's actually your workspace file, where you add all of your folders, different projects, single projects, and then you can specify settings which will override the global ones, and they will be taken into account for the current workspace. Other than that, if you don't have a workspace, but you still want to override the global ones, you can open a folder, or so-called a single project, and you can still override the settings there. You can specify different settings up here. And have in mind that that settings.json file usually doesn't come by default. You have to create it yourself manually, and it needs to be placed under the .vs Code folder where your launch.json and the rat.json is, which Kalman will talk about. Okay, so we looked where we can set our AO settings. And let's take a look at some of the AO settings that can boost your performance, can make your life as an AO developer easier. Okay, here is a table. I'm not going to basically read what is written over there, but I'll talk briefly about them. The first one, which is incremental build, I need to give you a little bit of a backstory about it. So when you open a document and you start typing your AO, what we do is, on every keystroke, we perform these so-called background compilations. So why are they needed? So they're needed because every time when you type something, we check if what you have typed is correct, and we provide you the necessary and the accurate diagnostics. So you can see diagnostic messages down in the bottom of your Visual Studio Code current project. So that's why we have the background compilation. So what happens if you specify incremental build? So incremental build comes by default with true. You can set it to false, And when you press Control-Shift-M-B, we are not going to use these background compilation. So that's actually an already precompiled state, which we by default use to speed up your full compilation of your project. If you set it to false, you'll get behavior similar to using our PowerShell client, and I believe many of you do that in your pipelines. Okay, we have the second one, editor service log level. This is something we recommend, or we actually ask for a lot in our GitHub. When you have issue and we need a little bit more verbose logging, we ask you to go and modify that file. You need to remember though, after you set the state to more verbose, because that's an enum option, you need to get it back to normal, because as Kalman likes to say, AO is very chatty language, and that file size can grow exponentially. The last two, browser and incognito, straightforward. They complement your launch.json when you actually, for example, open the debugger, or you publish your dev extension to your server. You can specify in which browser you want that one to be open, and if you want to be open in an incognito session. Have in mind that incognito won't work if the browser hasn't been changed. If you're using the system default, which is the default one coming, then incognito is not going to be taken into account. Next one, we have compilation options. So these are specific options which will increase or boost your performance when you're trying to build, compile your extensions. We have generate report layout, straightforward. Do you want the one to be generated or you don't want to? We have the next two, which are related to the compilation, if you want to use parallel compilation. So you can decide if you really want to use or you don't want to. On our servers, we go with parallel, so we have better performance. You can also specify the max number of parallel processes that can be executed, and we advise you to use the number of virtual cores you have on your machine. These options, parallel and max degree of parallelism, they come by default from .NET. So if you want to blame us about something, just go and blame .NET. I want to demo these two. So I'll switch here, and I want to show you what kind, okay, you see, good, what difference it will make. So I'll open our base app. That's, do you see? Should I zoom a little bit? Let me zoom a little bit. Okay, good. Not good. You don't see it different. Oh, no, you do. Okay, so that's our benchmark for a big project. It has probably over 7,000 application objects. And I want to show you the difference between the parallel compilation and non-parallel compilation. So there are a few options I want to highlight here. So the incremental build set to false. We want to start the compilation from scratch. And then the compilation options are parallel also set to false. So I've already pre-built that one, because it will take time. We don't have that much time in the session today. And we want to take a look at when the compilation has started. It has started at, what is that, almost 2:15. So that's late 13 minutes. And it has finished at 18:2. So that's what, 5 minutes approximately to compile. And then I'll switch to another project open, again base app. Here, incremental build, of course, set to false, but compilation options set to true, and the number of max degree of parallelism is set to 16. That's the number of virtual cores I have on that machine. So the compilation started at 23 minutes past, almost 23 minutes past, and it finished at early 27. So you gain almost a factor of 2 performance if you set the excuse me, the parallel to true. Let's get back to the presentation. Finish with the next two. Oops. We move fast. Good. Slideshow. Current. And next one. Good. So delay after last document change and delay after last project change. So that's also related to the background compilation I talked about. So if you have a big project, again, example with our base app, and you don't want to get these, the diagnostics that often, because you know that when you modify a big project, that will trigger a compilation. It will take time. It might slow your development. If you have, slower machine, if you don't have that big of hardware resources, it will take time. It will consume your memory. You can specify these two settings according to your needs. You can see the default values up here. Have in mind that after last project change has to be always bigger than after last document change. And then the last one, continue build an error. That was introduced by request by you guys, by the community in GitHub. It is related to how we actually compile projects. Whoever is familiar with compilers, you know that we need to first parse the file and then move to other stages. And I remember the exact request was that you weren't getting all the errors. So if you open the project in Visual Studio Code, then we are able to parse, for example, on multiple stages, and then you get more diagnostics. But in your pipelines, you get less, because what we used to do is, if we fail at parsing, then we don't continue. So that one, if you specify that parameter, we will try to continue building so we can give you as many errors as possible. But you have to also bear in mind that if you specify that one to true, and that's also only a PowerShell flag, if you specify that one to true, we cannot ensure you if the diagnostics will be accurate, because after wrongly parsed file, we don't really know what will happen. And having said that, I'll pass to Kalman. And he will talk to you about workspaces.
Yes, so what are workspaces? So what is an AL workspace? Because we are talking about an AL workspace. So simply defined, an AL workspace is just a collection of one or more AL projects. And then, so what is an AL project? So an AL project is a collection of files, mostly AL files, JSON files, XML files, that produces a single output, an AL app file. An AL project is defined by the app.json file. A workspace, can be standalone, or it can be a multi-root workspace. And why is this important? So the biggest advantage, as I see it, of a workspace is that it allows you to work on multiple projects within one VS Code instance. But there are other advantages. So let's take the next. So in a workspace, you can define projects, and these projects can be set in a dependency relationship. So what does that mean? So that means that in the dependencies entry in your app.json, you can specify a project, another project in this workspace. And then this project will be a project reference. If you work with Visual Studio, you have similar notions. So, a workspace is sort of similar to a solution, and then you have projects in Visual Studio, and you have project references. So in AL, these are very similar terminologies. So there is no distinction between a so-called project reference and an app reference. So the distinction is made by logic. So if a project exists in your workspace with these names, then they are project references. If not, they are app references. The important thing with projects and project references is that once we see a project reference, every resolution, symbol resolution, will happen from the project. We are not even going to load the app, even though it's in your package cache path. So we're going to ignore it completely. This is a new thing since, I think, January this year or February this year. So when you work in a workspace and you have multiple projects, there is always one active project. And why is this important? And what is the active project? So the active project is basically the project that's in your view. So, you know, for example, if you have an AL file open, then your active project is the project where this AL file has been defined for. Or if the app.json, then it's that project. And why is this important? It is important because all operations, all commands, they happen in the context of the active project. So the active project can be seen on the bottom toolbar. It's there. So you always know in which context you are. Now, if you have a workspace with multiple projects, loading them is a bit, yeah, as you probably know, and we got a few complaints about, there are some rules. Okay, so let me explain these rules for you. So let's assume that I have a relationship like this. So I have a myleaf app that has a project reference to a MySystem app. And then myleaf app also depends on MyBase app. And then there is also an external app here, which is not a project reference. So what happens if I load MyBase app? So what happens if I load MyBase app? That will first load MySystem app. Then it will load MyBase app. And then myleaf app will not get loaded. That will stay unloaded. And it's marked with a letter N as not loaded. So I was talking about project-to-project references and resolving symbols, and I will repeat this thing again because this is important. If you have a project reference, that is the resolver. Even though you have an app file for it, we're not going to use that. So let's talk about building a little bit, building projects with project references. So you always build the active project. Yes? But if the project references have so-called red change or change, you know, red change means that you change an application object file. Then we are going to so-called build in forward topological order, which means that we are going to build a project reference first, and then we are going to move backward, but only if those projects have been dirtied. And I have here a hint for you. So do build often on large projects, but because at the end of each Control-Shift-B build, we are going to do a GC collect, and that is supposed to, you know, release your memory. So let's just look at all these things that I've been talking about. Oops, this is not visible. My screen is not visible. I don't know why. At what? Yeah, no, the other one doesn't matter, but you know, I can go to the other one.
It's not visible.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see my screen here, but I see mine, but I don't see it reflected on the. Okay. Can I get some technical help from the technical people? Let me unplug it.
Try that one in P and see what screen.
Yeah.
Try.
Nothing. Yep. Sorry. So Yeah, where were we? So we wanted to demo some of the workspace things, which you probably, I think, how many of you are using workspaces? Okay, yeah,
Good.
Well, a lot. So let's do these scenarios that I was talking about. So I have here these projects, and they are in this relationship. So what you can see here is a workspace with my Leaf app, my Base app, my system app, and then an external app, which is not in this project. Yeah, so I have only these three. And then let's reload the project, but let me reload let's start with my system app. What happens here if I reload this one? And I reload window. Then the message box should appear that the project is loading. So here down, this is something new we added half a year or a year ago. And then what happened is that only my system app was loaded. My Leaf app and my Base app hasn't been loaded. I mean, you load my Leaf app by just clicking any of the files, then that will load. So now let's do this Ctrl-Shift-B that I was talking about. So again, in this scenario, my Leaf app has a project reference to my system app. Yeah? So if I just build it, Ctrl-Shift-B, let me toggle the screen that you can see which. Ctrl-Shift-B. Then, so I said that the project reference should build, but it hasn't been built. Only my Leaf app has built. And why is that? Because I haven't dirtied, so I haven't worked with my system app. So if I just, add some lines here, yes, command maybe, and then if I rebuild my Leaf app, that should build my system app too. Yeah. So you see, if I dirtied my system app, then even though I build my Leaf app, that will build a forward topological order for my system app and then my Leaf app. Okay, so this was about building, and let's see the next step you do in Visual Studio Code is publishing. And for that, Nikolay is going to talk about dependency publishing.
Okay, we move to dependency publishing. So you get to know how workspaces work. You have a workspace in Visual Studio Code, and that's actually a brand new feature. We got very positive feedback during the workshops about it. So let's see what will happen. Just imagine a scenario. You're an AO developer. You have fresh and tidy workspace, sandbox, not workspace, sandbox environment, sorry. And then you have your workspace with number of projects. Let's imagine a complex dependency graph. I mean, that's how I imagine a complex dependency graph. I mean, always, it can get complicated, always, but I needed to show something, right? So let's imagine that dependency graph. So you have all these projects, and you want to publish to a fresh sandbox, completely empty. Only our standard apps are published over there. So what would you do? So back in the days, what would you do is, if you want to publish an app, yeah, I need to, sorry for showing my back, but I need to point a little bit. Let's pick app 11. If you want to publish P11, what you had to do back in the days is, in order to resolve the dependencies in the server, to go and publish first P2, then P3, I mean, that order doesn't matter, P6 and P8. And you also have to be aware of the topological order of your dependencies beforehand, so you know how to publish them. We hope that we mitigated that for you. So what we will do from now on is you just open one of the projects, part of your workspace. Then we'll, as Kalman showed, build that active project of yours with all these dependencies, and we introduced a new option where you can publish all of its dependencies and that project included to your fresh sandbox. Let me demo it for you. So I'll pick project 13, and you can see its dependencies on the right hand. It is right, yeah, on the right hand side of the screen. So I jumped to Visual Studio Code, and fingers crossed that demo would work, because I literally cleaned my environment 2 seconds before Kalman finished his. We have the workspace here, all the projects in the same order as in the previous picture. I've opened P11, and you can see P11 is our active project down on the left corner. What I would do is I'll go Control-Shift and P. I'm not going to show the toggle screen mode. It's not necessary. And then I'll select Publish Full Dependency Tree for active project. Then I'll switch to output. Just ignore these errors. That's for another project. We're not touching it. And then I'll go to output. Yes. So let's see what happens in output. So first we say, okay, somewhere in the top. Yes. First, we compile locally in the topological order all its dependencies. So that's where we compile. Then we say prepare to publish 11 projects. And these are the 11 projects we are going to publish. We have sorted them in topological order, so you can see which one will be published first, second, third, and so on, until the last one. And then we start publishing. So then we publish one by one, until we get to the end. And yeah, the demo worked, so we can see done publishing project 11 of 11, and then that project is P13. Okay. Actually, you should be excited here. I hope you are. Yes, thank you. Let me prove it for you. If you go to extension management page, I'm going to use some of these extensions later, so you'll see. But yeah, they are published. All of them are here. Okay. So let me talk more about the feature and what it does, and what are the current limitations. I might repeat some of the slides, or what is written on the slide, but let me say, okay, so we currently compile the current active project, and we reuse its launch.json. It's actually on the roadmap to introduce launch.json or launch configurations for your workspace, so then you will be able to have one configuration for your whole workspace and use that one instead. Okay, what happens if some of the projects fail to compile locally, fail to compile on the server when we publish them, or anything else happens? We just fail the whole operation. And then it's up to you to sort it out what has happened. I guess we'll give you accurate, diagnostics to figure it out easily. Then that feature, and the best for that feature, is that it's only V6 implementation, so it lives only in the Visual Studio Code extension. So you can use it with older environments. No matter if you have 20, 21, 19, whatever, you can use the latest extension in Marketplace and then publish to older environments. Good. Do I forget something? Yeah, you check it out from the slides. Okay, let me move forward. So we are back to the complex graph, and you have published your project and all of its dependencies, and then you continue developing. So what you would do is, I guess you get one project, you publish it, you modify it, you debug it, everything that is usually in your normal day-to-day work. So, in order to demo what will happen if you have dependency publishing, not the whole workspace, but just few dependencies, I'll cherry pick some of the projects for simplicity. I'll pick 13, 11, and 12, and I'll open a new, smaller workspace. So here it is. So P11 and P8 are part of my workspace. P11, P8, and P12 this time are part of the dependencies available on the server. And now I want to talk to you about dependency publishing and what actually happens on the server when you publish some of the so-called dirty projects in your workspace. So we move forward. We do not here with asterisks the dirtied projects. As Kalman said, in a workspace, dirty project means that you need to modify some of the source code. Or app.json, right? Yes. So let's pick the first scenario. You have dirtied both P11 and P8, and P11 depends on P8. And then what we will do is we want to publish P8. Then we will create that file with extension dep.app. And what we will do is we will publish that one to the server. We'll, before actually publishing or actually compiling from the server side P8, we will uninstall all of its dependencies, P11 and P12. Then we will compile, publish, compile, P8, and then we will install all of them in the right order. Another scenario, if we want to publish P11, which depends on P8, and both of them are dirtied, you saw that in the workspace, if you dirty both of them and you compile the dependent one, it will actually compile the base one also. So that will happen in the server as well. So if you want to publish P11, we will publish P11 with that dep app file. What we will do is we will uninstall the whole graph. We will publish both P8 and P11 in the right order, P8 first, P11, compile them, and then install P12 back. Why is that needed? So we can get all the data updated. More. Since it's the topic of today's session is customizing, that assumes that you have the flexibility to change that behavior. You can go to your launch.json file. You find dependency publishing option parameter over there, which is an enum, and you can change that behavior. Why would you want to change that behavior? Again, we take as an example our base app, our benchmark for big application. As I said, you might want to actually ignore publishing P8. If P8 is big, and you know that your changes to the app that extends P8, or it depends on P8, are not breaking changes. So you're still able to work with the older version of it. Then you might want to skip publishing and recompiling, sending to the server that P8 if it's that big, and if its compilation takes time. So then you can specify ignore. Strict is actually only about the workspaces, but you can go here to our official documentation page and see more about these options. Let's take a look, before rapid application development, let's take a look at demo for these stuff. So now you have to bear in mind, because I didn't have the time to switch, right? And I need to switch. We switch to another workspace. That's the graph, just as a reminder. And we have P8, P11, and P12. All of them are published. What we have here is one base page, and we have an extension, and that base page is 50.108. And let's open 50.108 and see what it does. We already published it with the workspace publishing. So there are some messaging from here. The first one comes from P8, and then the second one comes from P12, and then it also prints a variable which is part of P8, hello again coming from P8, and then P11. That should be a bit that is old. So let me show you now. What we will do is we will dirty both of them. We will change that variable. Let's say coming again x2, and let's change hello to hi. Good. And also dirty P11. As I said, okay. Coming from here should be updated. Let's remove should be updated. That's part of the testing before. And let's change that one also to high. So what should happen, because we'll reinstall P12, is P12's message should take into account the change of that protected variable. And the rest is obvious. Also P11 and P8 should do that. So we publish P11, right? We go Control-Shift-P, then we say publish, say without debugging. That's fine. No workspace folder. Good. Even better, let's try to reload the window. So now you're seeing troubleshooting live. Yeah, I was concerned for the previous one, not for that one, for the previous demo. Good. Let's try to publish again. Okay, now everything's fine. We're publishing. And now we got to P8. The first message coming from P8, that one we didn't modify. Second one coming from P12, we can see that the protected variable has been updated because we reinstall P12. And then from P11, again, we can see the updated message, x2 high, and then coming again. And then here we removed whatever it was, I don't remember. Good. So with that said, we move to RAD, Rapid Application Development, and Kalman will talk about it.
Yeah, so let's briefly talk about RAD. I will try in like 3 slides explain what's going on beneath. So what is Rapid Application Development? This feature set has been introduced like I think 4 years ago or even more. And what it serves, it's a fast incremental compilation and deployment step in one word. So all these things are happening on the server. So this is all a server thingy and not a Visual Studio Code thingy. So in order to, I will try to explain what is RAD. So you will see that it's probably worth using it. So in order to understand how RAD works, let's just go back a step, and I will try to explain on this diagram what happens if you say Control F5 on an app. So let's assume that you have this base app, which has 3 application objects. It's table A, page A, and code unit A. Then you say Control F5. Then this app file is sent to a Business Central server through our services. And then with a Control F5 from within Visual Studio Code, at least these 3 things happen. So there will be a compilation, there will be a sync, and there will be a run, yes, when the browser comes up. So let's go, what does it mean, compilation? So on the server, this app that you already compiled, we are going to recompile that. It's not that we don't trust that compilation, it's because at this point on the server, we are going to compile it a little bit more. It's not just we are going to create abstract syntax trees and bind things together. We are going to emit things. We are going to emit 2 constructs. We are going to emit something called a metadata, and we are going to emit C# code. And this metadata, this is an overused term. In our case, metadata means an XML file. And for example, for a table, this XML file, it will define how it should be created on SQL Server. For a page, it defines how it will interact with the web client. So when the sync happens, then from this metadata, we are going to create the physical table. And then when you run, and this is where the interesting thing happens, using this metadata part, the XML things, and the C# code, we are going to generate .NET DLLs. We are going to load these .NET DLLs in the running Business Central process address space. So basically, at the end, you are running .NET DLLs. Okay, so let's move to RAD. So the important part here was that compilation will produce metadata and C#. So if we go back and we take this scenario that you had a base app, then you published it on the server, then we compiled on the server, and we created metadata out of it. Yes, in a table called application object metadata table, which is an app table. It's not a tenant table, it's an app table. So assume that we do the following thing. We modify table A, like, we add the method, and we add a completely new table E. And then we publish again, now with the red publishing. So what will happen is, on the NST, on the server, is that we are going to only take table A and table E as files, even though they may reference other symbols from their own project. We don't care about them. We will treat them as symbols. So we are going to create some sort of artificial symbol file in order not to parse and bind too much. And then basically, we are going to do a diff in the application object metadata table, and we are going to update table A and insert table E. The important part here is that if red works, if you have 7,000 application objects and you do a red publishing and you modified only 2, the time it takes, it should be similar as you would have only changed 2 files. And that's the difference. Okay, so that's how red works that's how it was designed at least. So let's try and let's do a demo, okay? So here, this is a daring demo. I'm telling you why. This is our base app. I took it, like 2 o'clock. I took it from our repository. So here you have 7,000 something application objects. So everything is here. This is the customer list. And I already published it, at 2 o'clock. And it is Control F5 on my machine, which is a medium powerful machine. My machine with, I think I have 64 gigs, but yeah, it's a 3-year-old machine. It took like 4.5 minutes to publish, which is not a bad time. But let's see what happens if I do red. So let me add a new code unit here. And let's use a snippet. Let's give it an ID. I don't know. So let's save this one. And then let's do a red publishing, which is, let's use the command. So let's publish it without debugging. We don't want to debug this. So I click this one. It will do a full build. And until it finishes, let's just continue with the slide. So the shortcuts for red are Control-Alt F5 in Visual Studio Code if you just want to publish without debugging, or Alt F5 if you want to do red publish with debugging. Now, there are a few things you should be aware when you are doing red publishing. So red publishing requires a baseline. Because it's an incremental publishing, so you need to have something that it increments. Manifest changes, we don't support that, are not supported for red. There is an unfortunate side effect of red that if it fails, you cannot re-red until it successfully publishes. You have to do a new baseline. And we don't really support this kind of big rename refactoring, so that's not good for red. So if you do change an application object ID refactoring, that's not gonna get supported. And translation, permission, layout, and web service definition, if you change these ones, they don't participate in red. Only AR files participate in red. Okay, so let's see if this publishing has finished. Yeah, so previously it was, and don't forget that, whenever I'm sharing something, the DVM process starts, desktop Windows Manager process starts running in the background. That also eats a lot. So, this was 1728, and it finished like a minute. Yeah, but it was 5 minutes, almost 5 minutes before. So you gain things, yes. Normally it should be 20 seconds, publishing base up. At least my experience says, if you don't do huge amount of changes. Okay. So, well, I think our time is up. But if you have questions, just ask them on the app, and then we will try to answer them.
I think it depends.
Or if you can ask.
I mean, if the organizers don't kick us out, it's the last session.
Or I'm staying here. You can come by and, you can ask questions like for 5-10 minutes. I will stay here if you want. Okay? But that ends our presentation. Thank you very much.